Pirkei Avos, third chapter, first Mishnah. If one gazes or reflects on three things, you will not come to sin. Now, why is a sin referred to as an avero? Usually, there's another term which is called chet. Chet is a sin. But the word avera, they're both generic references to sin. In Hebrew, the word lavor means to pass over, transgress. Transgression, you transgress, you cross over. If you consider these three issues, which you will discuss, you will never cross that line. You will never come to cross, which is transgressing. Now, what is histakel? In Hebrew, there's word riyah, to be roeh, to see. Histakel is an expression where in Hebrew, the word seichel means intelligence. We know in the Hebrew language, the samach and the sin, the pronunciation is the same, they're interchangeable. Histakel means when you look at something, you gaze at something with a certain focus, what the takeaway is, you have an appreciation for what you see. We see many things, but we just gloss over things. But when it's a very directed, focused type of looking, you notice things which you normally don't notice because you just gloss over things. So if you consider, you reflect on three issues, it's a seeing, it's not visual seeing, it's consideration, mentally speaking, you will not come to cross that line. You will not come to sin. Now, when I'm talking about a person who is totally ignorant of what's right and what's wrong, it's like the Ramchal, Rabbi Tzadok writes in his work of Path of the Just, he writes in the introduction, whatever I'm going to teach you and tell you, you know it. You know it already. You do know it. I'm not introducing any new concepts. However, but I'm going to make you aware of what you're aware of and how what you're aware of, how that should impact your life. And it's all based on appreciating the value of what you know, the consequences of what you know, the ramifications of what you know, the benefit of what you know, or what you don't know, which will be an impetus to what? To research and do your diligence to have a greater appreciation and understanding of what is and what's not. That's the concept. Many years ago, I was giving a class to women. And this woman then, she was a woman in the mid-70s. And I put a question out to these women. Every woman there was middle-aged and more. And I said to them, what is your purpose in existence? What is our purpose in existence? That's the question I put out. And I went to show all the considerations why people think it is. It's not. Is your purpose in existence to be a benefit to society, to benefit society in terms of your contribution, whether it's a financial contribution, whether it's an intellectual contribution, whether it's a service contribution. Let's say that's your purpose in existence. But let's say a person fails on every one of those levels. He doesn't financially succeed, that he's able to make a financial contribution. Intellectually, he has a very ordinary level of intelligence. And service-wise, he's no better than any ordinary person. So what is your value in existence? Why do you exist? So whatever initially you thought, very often, you realize it's not what you thought it was. I'm going to become a rich man, and therefore I'm going to be able to do such and such. What happens if you don't become the rich man? What happens if you don't become that scientist who discovers something which will benefit society? So after everything is said and done, and whatever your initial dreams had been, or your ambitions had, believed would lead you to. It doesn't come to fruition. Bottom line, after everything's said and done, what is your value in existence? Your value in existence. So I put this question out. So one of these ladies is 75 years old, and she says to me, you know something? I never thought about it. Can you imagine a person living 70 years, 75 years walking the face of this earth, and you never thought of why you exist? To raise a fine family. What happens if your family's not so fine? Your children are not such great children. They're totally disrespectful to you. They couldn't care whether you live or die. Those kind of children. Whatever. Disappointed. So yes, after everything's said and done, why do I exist? Why did God put me on this forsaken earth? There's only one answer. To meet challenges. We're talking about a person who believes in God. Person believes in God. It's not, things are not random. You believe in God, you're here for a purpose. The purpose is to meet challenges. If I succeed, it's a success. If I fail, then I failed. So as much as I succeed, in God's eyes, that's a success. And what's a success in other people's eyes may be a failing in God's eyes. But bottom line is it all comes back to what God values to be positive or negative. That's what it's about. So over here, very often we take liberties of many things. Why? Because we say it's not so terrible. Not so terrible. If I do this, is it so terrible? What's the calamity? What about if you realize that there's accountability? And ultimately, there's going to be a day of reckoning. And you can't get away with anything. And ultimately, it's going to come to haunt you. And all of a sudden, the skeletons in your closets, they're going to start rattling. You know, like the 17-year locust. You ever hear the 17-year locust? When they start making those noises, you know, you hear it 24 hours a day. Same idea. What are you going to do? So the only reason why we minimize many things we do is because it's not so terrible. What about if you're going to come before the judge and he's going to present that question? What's this all about? And you're not going to have an answer. And you're going to be presented with that question. As much as you want to deny that you won't, you will be. You know something? Then initially, before you cross that line, you're going to think twice, or maybe more than twice. Because ultimately, there's accountability. So very often, we do many things because we feel we have rights. What about if you have rights? Where ultimately, it's going to be proven that you never had a right. And not only that, you're going to be penalized or prosecuted and punished for doing something which you believe you had a right, which you had no right. And it's fact, you're going to be caught. You know, a person's on camera. He's not going to he's not going to steal. Of course, the evidence is right there. And if he's aware he's being photographed or being filmed, he's not stealing. So if that is the reality, more than the reality, you'll say, well, I didn't realize that. I thought it was mine. But if God knows your intentions and every nuance of your being, what initiated it, why you did it, what you did, how you did it. So the evidence is against you, stacked against you. And there's no wiggle room. The person is not going to sin. He's not going to transgress. He's not going to cross that line. And that's exactly where our Kavi Ben says, if you consider these three things, which are realities, you will not come to sin. The whole concept of entitlement. What do we have entitlement? Does that emanate because from our humility or from our sense of value? A person's truly humble. A person feels almost embarrassed to ask for more than he deserves because he feels he's not really deserving. In terms of what God has given him, again, we're speaking of a person who believes in God. In terms of what God has given every one of us, where do you have the audacity to ask for more than you have? You're endowed with good health. You're endowed with intelligence. You're not, and you're not satisfied. How can you not be satisfied? Well, if you're a self-centered purpose, pompous, you feel you deserve more than most people, despite that you have that. You don't appreciate what you've given because you feel you're more entitled. Therefore, we make demands, and therefore we make certain decisions. I think I've given enough to God. I studied my 15 minutes today, my half an hour today. I prayed once a day. I pray, I buy my tickets on the high holidays, and it cost me a fortune. I make my UGA donation, Federation donation once a year. It's enough. Understand? Now, who's calling the shots? Do you call the shots, or does God call the shots? Well, I think I do. Why? Because I earned it, and I earned it. I have a right to say how, when, and where it goes. But you realize that whatever shot you call, it's only because God allowed you to shoot that shot, and to succeed to the degree you succeeded. And if you come to that realization, you'll be humble. A person spends money like a spendthrift because he believes that there's an unending source to that money. And then the person who actually has been funding him says, by the way, how do you behave so expressly? He says, don't tell me what to do with my money. Person says, something, whatever money you're spending, I'm giving you that money. And if you cross the line one more time, I cut you off. The flow stops. There's no more flow of money. Person, you give me the money. You're my benefactor. Yes, I don't believe it. Believe it or not, but you'll see. I thought I did it all on my own. Okay, you want to believe that, but it's not reality. My rabbi used to tell me those things, but now it's coming to haunt you. Not simple. There was a person many years ago at Yad Rambam. I don't think he's alive today any longer. I'm not sure what happened to him. But at one time, he was a very successful Wall Street person. Never got married. And he fell on very hard times. And the clothing he wore initially he bought it it was custom made from the best clothiers. But the sport jacket must have been 35, 40 years old. You could see it was old, but initially it was good quality. He had a sense of self, he had dignity. And he had to wear, he couldn't put on something that was less than that. That's who he was. And he was humbled, very humbled. He literally didn't have two nickels to rub together. And he lived in a state of denial. Claimed somebody had stolen from him, and he dedicated his whole life to go after that person and represent himself in court. He couldn't afford a lawyer. It was a pitiful situation. But he was truly a humble guy. He was a humble person. Unfortunately, people never wake up. So how do you wake up? You have to open your eyes, and you have to see things look through a lens which is a responsible lens, not a colored lens. That's istaka b'shlosha dvarim. You are endowed with intelligence, use that intelligence. That all this pompousness and all this fanfare, all this ego stroking, it has no value whatsoever. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. If you consider these three things, you will not come to cross the line. Da me'ayin boso. Know from where you come. Lo nata hovech. Where are you going? And before who in the future will give a judgment and a computation, meaning the day of reckoning. Before who you would come before a day of reckoning. We'll see in a moment. The one you can come for a day of reckoning, that judge, he's going to have the evidence so tightly in order, you're not going to have any wiggle room. You're not going to be able to deny that it's not your action. First thing, consider from where you come. Mitipo srucha. We leave the person in suspense. Where do you come from? I come from royalty. Wherever you come from royalty, from where is yours? Where did it all begin? a putrid droplet of semen. Now, how does that somehow humble a person? You come from a droplet, but look where I am today. I have a 300 IQ. I'm one of the most handsome men. I have an ability. I have a stamina. I have an energy. How does that somehow put things in perspective? By understanding from where do you come? Where do you come? I come from Tipas Ruach. Now, if God wouldn't have allowed that droplet of semen to fertilize the ovum, you know where you'd be? You wouldn't exist. Because that droplet of semen, it only has motility up to a certain point. Afterwards, it becomes totally ineffective. It will not fertilize that ovum. The Talmud tells us the motility in sperm is only for 3 days. After 3 days, and the environment has to be right, a woman will not become impregnated with that sperm. But even to survive 3 days, it's almost miraculous. The environment has to be so perfect for a woman to conceive from that. So who do you think you are? Don't you realize you're a miracle? If not for God allowing that droplet of semen to have that fertilization characteristic, you wouldn't be here. But it's not convincing enough. Lana toholech. Do you know I have a private, by the game, I have a, not only do I have box seats, I have a room, private room. I invite all my buddies there, you know, and only the elites in my whatever you want to call it, my cabin. You know where you're going. You're going to the dust, which you can be food for the maggots and the worms. Welcome, Reba Vatoleah. So you think, it's true, I come from droplets, putrid droplet of semen, but I have one of a kind of intellect. I have one of a kind of looks. I have a stamina. I have a power. But you know where that's all ending up? In the grave. See, it's not so terrible, you know? You be put in the mausoleum. They'll use all kinds of the best quality formaldehyde. They'll be protected from the maggots and the worms. But after everything's said and done, you have a few good years. And what happens after the few good years? Where you going? You nosedive. Right off the cliff. Many years ago, there was a flight that left New York for Switzerland. It was a Swiss Air flight. And it flew over Newfoundland. And all of a sudden, there was engine trouble. And it nosedived and went straight into the ocean. Straight, direct. You know what happened? The plane disintegrated. When it hit the ocean, it's like hitting a brick wall. The impact was the plane was totally, not only decimated from the heat and from the impact, it disintegrated. There was a religious man on the plane. They found his talus floating in the ocean. Found debris, but the plane itself, you understand? You're this big shot, written up, Wall Street Journal, neon lights. You take over a club. You have your helicopter, you have your this, you have your yacht, you have all this nonsense. After everything is said and done, what does it all end up? They auction it off at best. And where's this guy? He's put out to hang. He's hung out to dry. He becomes food for the maggots and the worms. Well, artificially, he's not going to decompose. Because they take all the blood out of him, they're going to put in formaldehyde rather than blood or some other chemical. So you mean you lived artificially, and when you're dead, you're artificial. You're not even the real guy. That doesn't put a mannequin in the coffin. Looks like him, talks like him. They could even put recordings of the person's voice. And when you pass by, they'll tell you how arrogant he is and who he is and what he is. But the whole thing is foolishness. Something we understand when we're 20 years old, and we understand it well when you're 30 years old, because of your experience of life, 10 more years, what you knew at 20, it takes on a different degree of value. when you reflect at 30. And when you're 40 and 50, as you see life as more of a reality, and many things which are just abstract lessons become lessons of life. As they say, the school of hard knocks. Life is reality. It's not abstract. That's what it is. All these values and understandings take on a real substantial value. It becomes your reality. When we're young, we believe there's nothing we can't tackle. It's called idealism. Person's idealistic. Young people, as you get older and you have a few disappointing setbacks, it puts a damper on your idealism. It's not as simple as you think. You begin realizing that life's not a bowl of cherries. You just hope it's more positive than negative. But in reality, it's not what he originally thought. When those things happen to other people, because, and we'll have 20 reasons why other people, it's not going to happen to you. Whether it's not succeeding financially, even if you do succeed, not having financial reversals, not having accidents, not having tragedies. People delude themselves. There's no life which is perfect. The question is, how imperfect is it? And even if it's not perfect, do you learn the lesson from that setback, and that makes it more perfect? Because you see the value of sometime of not succeeding. It's a lesson that you take away. There was a grandson of Reb Shimshon Hirsch through the maternal line. And when he came to the United States and he built the Yankee community in Washington Heights, which was replicated after the community in Frankfurt, Germany, the shul was built, same architecture, many things were almost identical. And he started a yeshiva with a curriculum, with a certain infrastructure to perpetuate that approach to Jewish education. And there was a German Jew who was wealthy, who lived in the Heights. And he says he revered Rabbi Breuer, and he started to support all his projects, his initiatives to build a community. After a while, when he became a little chummy with Rabbi Breuer, which was not so simple, he starts giving Rabbi Breuer advice, how to run the community, what should be, what should not be. Rabbi Breuer was a very strong personality, ramrod straight, and he says to this man, look, you want to help me build the community, support the many initiatives, I'm very appreciative. But if you want to tell me how to do it, and what to do, and what not to do, I appreciate the money you gave, but you take your money and go elsewhere with it. I'm not interested in your money. That's what he told him. Even though the money was essential for him to build that community, it didn't make a difference. But I'm going to build something which I don't want to build that. I want to build that I believe this should be built. Now you're building a building, somebody suggests, what are you spending money on? Quality material, you have inferior quality. So the builder says to this person, but you realize after 15 years, this building is going to collapse. So what's the value of using inferior? They would spend more and the building will last for 100 years without a question. Same idea. But people believe because you succeeded, there's no area that you're not an expert at and you have a right to say. To this kind of person who comes to me with this kind of attitude, I say, by the way, I have a person who has a certain heart issue and he needs a cardiac surgeon. Could you recommend someone? He says, that's not my area of expertise. Could get recommended. And I said, and since when's your area of expertise, totally Jewish education? How much did you study in your life? Well, Judaism is what you think, moral, ethical, this, that, it doesn't make a difference, more or less. Okay, if you believe that's what it is, then you can give advice. But if you understand it's no different than the cardiac surgeon, that you have to know exactly how to do what to do and what not to do, then you understand you don't belong there. So it's all ego. Even more exaggerated ego is arrogance.